Hello, everybody. I'm Ramon Mejia from the LitRPG Podcast. This is episode number 240 of the show. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and, of course, author interviews. And this week I have 6 new reviews for you folks at home, and that's going to include a few reviews from me, including Dungeons and Noobs, Noobtown book number 4, also Ninetoes, and I Only Level Up, also known as Solo. That's not the right one at all. There we go. Only Level Up, Solo Leveling, which is not actually a ebook. It's actually a webcomic or a manhwa, I think it's called. But in addition to those titles, I actually have a few contributed reviews from Ian Mitchell. He reviewed this week's Stars Asunder, book 9 in the System Apocalypse series, Underworld Vampire Gate, and The Heroic Villain number 3. So 6 titles in total from the podcast here for you to enjoy. But before we get into any of that, we're of course going to go into LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we just have one quick little story. Dakota Crowd and Luke Daniels did an AMA on Facebook this week to celebrate and promote the audiobook release of Ruthless, which is the 5th book in the Completionist Chronicle series. It's a book I thoroughly enjoyed, and it's finally come out as an audiobook. It's already doing amazing. It had a nice bit of pre-order, and fans are gobbling it up left and right, so definitely go check it out. And also check out this. It's a genuinely funny and interesting AMA where people ask questions and they talk to each other, Dakota and Luke, and Danielle. So it's like, it's fun things for everybody. So just go check it out. It's kind of long. I think it goes over an hour and a half, but it's entertaining the entire time. So go check it out. On to stuff that's come out recently that I haven't had a chance to read or review, just out for you to enjoy. And that includes the 6th book in the Idle System series, a new book called Hive Knight, a dark fantasy, Trinity of the Hive, book number 1. And this is actually the first book published through Tao Wang's publishing company, whose name I forget. But this is the first title he's publishing, the company that's not his. So it'll be interesting to see how well it does. Also out right now, though, is Intellectium, a real RPG series. This is a new Russian translation story. Also out is the 2nd book in the esports sci-fi LitRPG series called The Power of the Nine. Oh, sorry, it's called Mecha Battles, The Power of the Nine, Overdrive Volume number 2. I actually enjoyed book number 1, so I'm looking forward to reading that. Also out right now is Raiders Olympus Reborn, book number 2, also Dungeon Core 101, and The Stone Tree, a LitRPG Adventure Kingmaker Saga, book number 1, and is Ryan Brune's new entry into his Ether Flow series called Tech Duin and Ether Collapse series. Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't sure if this was actually going to be a LitRPG story, because the novel description kind of leads you to believe that it's not. Like, there's no, like, this is a gamelet story, this is a LitRPG story, or this has stats and stuff. It actually says that there's a little more on the cultivation side of things. And so it turns out, though, it is a LitRPG story. It takes a little bit to get to the RPG notifications in the story, and this is more of a super prequel to his main Ether Flow series with an independent character set, like, I think quite a ways in the future. So it's loosely tied to that particular series that the author writes, but it's the same kind of story-ish universe. But it turns out it is actually a LitRPG story. It just doesn't do a very good job of telling you that. So there you go. Also out now is Path to Villainy, a NPC Kobold's Tale, and Reroll, an epic LitRPG fantasy, and Tower of Damnation book number 2, which is the sequel to book number 1, which is a tower climbing book that I reviewed, I think it was a couple weeks ago. So this is the 2nd book in that series. And that's it for new ebooks. On to new audiobooks, and that's going to include Infernal Dungeon, Elemental Dungeon book number 2. Also out right now is Derelict book number 1, Repel Borders, Ruthless, which we mentioned before, and is already doing amazing with only being out for a couple of days. I think it has a couple hundred reviews already. Also out is Skyclad Fate's Annual book number 1. This actually came out a little bit earlier in the month. I just missed seeing it, so I'm letting you know about it now. I enjoyed this story as a LitRPG game of book. So just let you know, the audiobook is out now, and also the Ethergate Online, the complete saga, which is the full 3 books in the series, is out as one long audiobook if you want to go check it out. Also out in upcoming LitRPG, which is where I read a bunch of stuff that's coming out in the near future, and that includes the System Multiverse book number 2 out August 23rd. Out on August 24th is going to be War of Gods Dungeons of Perdition book number 4. August 25th it'll be Dream Reality. On August 27th, the Small Unit Tactics Volume 1. September the 4th, it'll be the 5th book in the Discardium series. September the 8th, this is new to the list. The 2nd book in the Snake's Life series, which is a monster main character story. So like a monster evolution. On September the 9th, it'll be Dungeon Worlds, a Reborn Online LitRPG adventure. September the 15th, Stolen Lives. September the 16th, the Guild Core book number 1. On September the 18th, the 3rd book in the Olympus Reborn series. September 21st, Labyrinth to Tartarus. On September 30th, the 4th book in the Gods Game series. On October the 1st, the Bad Guys book number 5. On October 1st, Legends Online book number 7. October the 2nd, Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Denman. October the 6th is going to be the 3rd book in the Life in Exile series. On October the 7th, it'll be City of Goblins. And October the 26th, it'll be The Other World, Underdog book number 4. On October 27th, Eternal Online book number 3. And November 23rd, Quest for the Ember Relic. So all kinds of neat stuff coming in the near future. But that's all there. And now on to new releases and reviews. And first up this week is going to be Dungeons and Noobs book, Noobtown book number 4, written by Ryan Rimmel. It is 323 pages. It is $2.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Bangalore has been patient, or at least as patient as a homicidal badger can be. With the celebration of Githwardar, it's finally time to go get Charles. Nothing is going to stop Jim and his companions, not even the signs of the Dark Overlord's return. This adventure could be Windfall's greatest yet, or it could be its absolute downfall. Okay, I'm actually going to do 2 reviews, one for myself and one from our contributor, Ian Mitchell. We just happened to read and review this book at the same week. No coordinated effort on our parts. This is actually a novel that came out a few weeks ago, and we just happened to get to it at the same time. My personal review is the novel has a bit of a slower paced first half. There's good humor, dialogue, character development, socialization with the team members, and world building. I especially like the holiday Gripthar Day. It's a cute little bit. Take on Christmas and stuff with the badger, so it's really adorable. It's not till the story hits about 40% that the pacing does pick up and the action hits, but once it does, it continues through the rest of the story, and there's finally some serious plot development with the initial premise of the story. It's a good twist. By the end, good stuff. I give it a score of 7.7 out of 10. Ian Mitchell, who's our contributor for the podcast, he sends in reviews. He actually just happened to review the same story, so I'm reading with the one. He says, "Happy Gripthar Day. I had mixed feelings about this one. The first 33% didn't do much for me, and I can absolutely see how that's the case. It's, like I said, it's kind of a slow start, which is something that the series has kind of repeated. I remember saying the same thing in book number 1 in the series." And he goes on, "I mostly slog through it. The cast basically futzed around in town. A lot of humor that didn't do much for me. I'm a bit humor impaired. It wasn't bad. I wasn't just having fun. But then comes Badger's Night. And now I'm laughing. The wide variety of trap-based abusive Jim had me chuckling. The humor and the banter started working for me. A lot of the last half of the book happens in the dungeon. Some decent delving, decent banter, and joking around. That was clicking for me. Man, Demon and Badger made for fun. The long epic battle at the end of the book was exciting. This wasn't a coherent experience overall. I could totally see that. Like, this very much split into like the first half of the story, which is slice of life, then the Greplar's Day, and then dungeon diving in the mid to end of the story. But he continues, I'll continue the series. I like the previous books, and he gives it a score of 7.5 out of 10, which is honestly one of the rare occasions when Ian gives a book a lower score than I did for once. But he's very clear about the issues he had, and those issues are repeated in some of the other reviews, but overall I think most people had a good time with it. And so that's a score of 7.7 from me out of 10 and 7.5 out of 10 from our contributor Ian Mitchell for Dungeons and Noobs, Noobtown book number 4. Okay, next up is going to be Ninetoes by Tim Andrews. It is 219 pages, $3.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. What if an NPC dismissed with contempt by the players of your role-playing game was to become an adventurer, a LitRPG adventurer? Ninetoes is a wizard, which is unusual for a goblin, more unusual still he's no longer an NPC. The world of Anderon is a game world, and a twist of fate has made Ninetoes an adventurer. With this new status comes access to power, magic, and skills that his kind can rarely attain. But more, it is a chance to grow and become the center of his own story. In his first quest among ancient ruins of Calarach, Ninetoes faces danger and intrigue. Failure mean the destruction of his home and his people, for whom he now has the potential to become their champion. Ninetoes must master the magic system of the game, advance as rapidly as he can, and find friends, for a wizard alone is vulnerable. If he can prevail, the hobgoblin adventurer might someday become the hero he needs to be. It's actually kind of a long-winded novel description, but it does tell you essentially the premise of the book. It does not however tell you that it takes a really good chunk of time to get to any of the RPG stuff. This story is a little bit more like, at least in the beginning section of it, like NPCs written by Drew Hayes, in that it's sort of a tabletop universe, but instead of a character's players being sent to this world, it's an NPC who essentially gets a character sheet because of a weird twist of fate in what the players on the tabletop game experience are doing. And so one of the characters dies, one of the players' characters dies, and he rolls a new character using an existing NPC that he was supposed to, the group was supposed to have killed. A hobgoblin, leader who's one of his toes gets cut off, and so he's named Ninetoes, and it gets character sheet, stat rolls, and everything which the reader gets to see. But then, because they're not great stat rolls, the player, of course, is like, I'm just gonna try to play another character here, and the DM puts that page inside of his books, and that's, as far as those players go, at least was one, the end of that experience with that character. But because that character Ninetoes got a character sheet, his experience and his existence in this, I'm not sure if it's ever a parallel universe, in this tabletop, story world universe, changes from being an NPC to a PC, a player character, or as it's described in the story as being an adventurer. And that's kind of where the story's, it takes a little bit to get there, but that's the main character's, entry. So instead of getting a character sheet where he's deciding these things, this is kind of a twist on that kind of concept, though. But again, it's a very kind of similar concept of NPCs becoming aware and getting powers and character sheets and levels that story goes through. So that takes about 10%ish of that. It then goes on to kind of this fantasy-esque section, because again, from the main character's point of view, he's not aware of any of this RPG stuff, and it's not until about 23%, so between 10 and 20%, it feels very much like fantasy-esque, which may be a turnoff for some readers. It's just kind of one of those things that you have to get through, because it is kind of a natural extension of this character, because he's not aware really of what's happening. He's just knowing that he's changed, and he's told that he has a character that he should visit this other guy who can explain these things better to him. But it takes like 23% of that story to kind of get to that point where it's finally revealed to this main character, you have a character page, and these are stats, and these are the things you can do as an adventurer in this world, and that your life is going to be different than That's where he starts his training experiences and his quest. And that's where the real little RPG section of the story actually starts. It just takes, again, it takes quite a bit into the story to actually get those notifications, stat pages, skill increases as he's training and adventuring and experience points and whatnot. But after the 23% mark, all of it really does feel more like a literature. It just takes, again, a little bit to get there. As far as the RPG game stuff goes, fairly familiar stuff, nothing super amazing here. You get stats again, real briefly at the very beginning of the story when that character sheet is made for Ninetoes, and then again at the 20% mark, but you also get levels, HP, skills, abilities, etc. Nothing too fancy or amazing, but again, they show up regularly after the 23% mark, which, may be a little bit long for some readers who don't want to wait that long, basically. The character, story-wise, again, most of the story is a little more slice of life, with the main character essentially getting this power, becoming an adventurer, and then kind of getting explained to him, and then going on like this singular quest adventure for the most of the story, where he's adventuring, getting in trouble, but also like exploring his abilities and skills and kind of the limits of this RPG system which he's trying to become familiar with. There are a few issues in the story for me, not major ones, but they were there. The main character, a hobgoblin, starts with the story again with his own clan and like a very reasonable fantasy-esque cultural background, where they're essentially raiders and they have this hierarchy system and it all makes sense. But once he becomes an adventurer, the way the world treats him magically seems to change, which was kind of a thing in my brain. I was like, that doesn't make sense for what's essentially a monster race character. The main character gains the ability to speak common, has an increased intelligence, and interacts with the nearby human village. And it's when he starts interacting with the other races that things feel a little skewed. And some of it can be kind of written off as, oh, he's smarter, and also he's an adventurer, so he should be treated, except that there's nothing to indicate just by looking at him that he's an adventurer in any way, shape, or form. Yet, as a hobgoblin who's part of a clan who was literally trying to rob humans and kill them and murder them for their stuff for a very long period of time, according to like the backstory, he just kind of walks into town and nobody looks twice at him, and he's treated very well, with traditional, what you would think of as traditional conflict between races not existing at all, or no real explanation of why they don't exist. So the humans treat him well, dwarves, elves, everybody, even though he's from a monster-ish race character. And so that always stuck out to me as like not either being explained away well enough or not really being inaccurate. I think there was a missed story opportunity, in my opinion, to kind of like do some world building and saying, oh yes, he is a monster main character, so he's getting this different treatment so he has to overcome adversity, or there's some logical explanation of why, like maybe he has super great charisma, or he has a special adventurer trait or something, right? Or he has to hide his it or something, right? But none of that happens. Instead, he's just kind of like, oh, he has no problems. I'm like, okay, that's a thing, I guess. So there you go. But like I said, small little thing. It doesn't take away too much. Overall, though, once the story gets to the RPG stuff, it's an interesting story of a transformed monster NPC into a player, essentially. Again, there's not like a super ton of plots. It's adventuring. The main character goes on, or quests he gets involved with. And it kind of also explores this huge perception of what normal people think of as an adventure in the world, but it's mostly, again, slice of life, adventuring, quest line at the end. And the end, it's a fairly entertaining adventure. So for me, it gets a score of 7.5 out of 10, which is like a very middle of the road good score for me. That's Ninetoes with a score of 7.5 out of 10. Okay, and next up is going to be Only I Level Up, also known as Solo Leveling. This is 116 chapters online. I believe there are new ones that were translated and released on a regular weekly basis. The chapters are free, or they're behind an unlockable paywall, depending on where you find this this online comic. And I'll read you the novel description. It says, in this world where hunters with various magical powers battle monsters from invading and defenseless humanity, Sung Jin-woo was the weakest of all hunters, barely able to make a living. However, a mysterious system grants him the power of the player, setting him on a course for an incredible and oftentimes perilous journey. Follow Sung Jun as he embarks on an adventure to become the unparalleled existence through his level up system, the only one in the entire world. Okay, now I want to note that there's a translated light novel version of this story, which I believe was the original inspiration for the comic version of it. But this is actually a review of the comic itself. I tried reading the fan translated light novel, and it was not enjoyable. I'll put it that way. But the comic version of it, all the graphics on the artwork translates very well. There's no confusion there. And just like dialogue being translated, even though there's occasionally a little snafu or confusion, it's done fairly well. And everything comes through as far as the story goes, really nicely. The first 10 chapters of the story are a little stretched out. I'll have to admit, I tried reading this story before about a year ago. And I got through about chapter 10. I was like, man, this doesn't seem like LitRPG to me. It's just maybe some dungeon diving. And I'm like, and I put it down. And it's not until like the 11th chapter, the chapter I didn't get to, where the RPG stuff actually exists, where like the main character gets his RPG interface screen system, essentially. So that first 10 chapters actually, it probably is a little bit too stretched out. Considering the pacing that happens in the story is like really action and adventure and like lots of, fighting and RPG leveling and good stuff like that. So if you've tried this before and you just didn't like the beginning section, I would really recommend that you try it again, or even just skip to like chapter 11. When the RPG interface is there, you're not going to miss too much, just like him being introduced as like this super weak character and like betrayals that leave him alone in this like super terrible dungeon. And all that's like very much good for character development and setup. But if it's stopping you from enjoying the story, I think skipping to 11 is like a perfectly acceptable like compromise, like enjoying the next over 100 chapters. The novel description kind of talks about with the fundamental premise of the story, so I'm not going to go terribly into that. But the RPG stuff in chapter 11, it appears, and you get to see level ups, that increases, and access to a system, store notifications, amazing items, abilities, etc. All the good regular stuff you've seen in a regular LitRPG story. So that is all very much there. The artwork is probably one of the things I like the most about the story. It's very vivid, it's colorful, it's action descriptions, or action showing in this case, I guess, are just like really well done. And the pacing of this is it hardly goes 1 or 2 chapters without some kind of fighting or action stuff going on. And even though it's essentially a series of like slice life story arcs where the main character is getting more powerful for various reasons and getting in deeper troubles and dangers and exploring why he has access to the system and his class abilities and stuff, how he develops those, it's entertaining every single chapter, whether there's like any particular action or not. If there's no action, there is some very interesting exploration of like world building and this stuff in the story that's done very nicely and well. It is on setting wise, it's set in the modern world where dungeons exist, and people and players, or not players, adventurers essentially go into there and kill monsters to close them for fun and profit, of course. And so that's kind of the setting of the story. Overall, once again, the story gets into the RPG power stuff. I was super on board, and I had just this a great time with all the action and all the great artwork about a weak guy who's determined to increase his powers despite the overwhelming odds. It really is a great story, and I'm super happy that I came back to it. And finally, I seriously binged through this entire like 116 chapters over like the course of one weekend when I should have been like doing other things. So for me, it gets a score of 8 out of 10. Super big recommend. Only I level up, also known as solo leveling. In the links in the show notes, I actually have a link to the official distributors for this in English, which is webnovels.com. But there are other places you can find them if you don't want to go through their paywall. I cannot recommend those or link those, however. So I have just some links for web novels. So there you go. And next up we have Ian's Picks of the Week. This is a segment of the show where Ian Mitchell, a longtime LitRPG community member who reads and reviews as much as I do, was nice enough to join the podcast and send us his reviews and stuff that I may not have read. He does read different things than me, and I can't always read everything that comes on a regular basis. So I've always really enjoyed his contributions to the podcast, and I'm happy to have them. This week, he has a couple other reviews. We're ready to talk about one earlier in the show for something we both happen to review. But first up, for things he sent us this week is Asunder, book number 9 in the System Apocalypse series by Tao Wong. He says, the Paladin's Choice. John travels to Erythea to pay off his favor, picking an initial class from a galactic empire. Great reading and intrigue. Combat was exciting. John may be a paladin, mostly a free-roaming troubleshooter, whose hobby is the assistant quest. Nice end for this arc, and he gives it a big score, 9 out of 10. I like that story too, by the way. He also reviewed this week Underworld Vampire Gate, a LitRPG series written by Apollos Thorne. Another story I liked. He says, Mr. Blue Mage, I love these are all dungeon books, interesting progression, a citadel down below, power leveling at its finest, and seeing in-game level spells, werewolf hunting, a fun ride without bogging down towns. Now, werewolf hunting itself is super out of context unless you've read the story. But the rest of it is, I absolutely agree with. And it's a really good story as well. And last but not least, he sent us a review for The Heroic Villain, book number 3, written by Charles Dean. He says, a grand romp of an adventure. Through endless fields of puns, tropes, and author cameos. I love the cinematic fight scenes. I enjoyed/endured the nigh endless puns where the author pushed it until I thought I couldn't take anymore. Smart with a fair bit of social commentary and insight that fit the story well and didn't feel too preachy. I thoroughly enjoyed the book and the series, which I can easily recommend. And I thoroughly enjoyed this as well. I gives it a score of 8.7 out of 10. So nothing but great reviews from the guy this week. Heroic Villain book number 3, again, a score of 8.7 out of 10. And that's going to end the reviews from Ian this week for Ian's Picks of the Week. And that is it, folks. That is the end of the show. We have had a great show this week. 6 new reviews, some good LitRPG news, and a bunch of great stuff that came out for you to enjoy and read this weekend or the week as you read or listen to it. We've linked in the show notes for a bunch of good Facebook group, Twitter pages, for places you can contact us or communicate with us, or just go scroll through our back catalog of over 1,000 LitRPG reviews that we've done over the past few years. Also links in the show notes for Facebook groups where authors and readers get together in various ways, sharing memes, having fun together. And of course, if you enjoyed the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find out all the ways to help support the podcast and keep it free and ad-free for you folks at home at litrpgpodcast.com/support. And thanks again for hanging out with me. And until we can hang out again, remember to go read some LitRPG.